minute दीजिए. Uh-huh.
Are they all there? All attendees, okay. Well, good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for being here. This is the 16th edition, I think, of the Living Building series. We took about 3-4 weeks of a respite because we wanted to see that the last month, a significant month that celebrates many events of the Indian Green Building Council was coming in the way. So we said, okay, let's see how it gives us a pause. And therefore, the Living Building series resumes now this week with a wonderful professional whom I've known for about a year, but more about him later. First, I'd like to welcome the director of the School of Architecture, Architect Rajendra Kumar. Wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much for making time and for being as a collaborator and partner with us all here at the Premchand Memorial Trust. For the rest of you, I must tell you that he is a practicing architect from Delhi. What is interesting is that he did his master's at the Politecnico in Milan, which is a very reputed institution in many ways, and I have had some tryst with that institute for at least the last 12 or 15 years. He's been a member of a few things in Europe to do with city planning and regional planning and such. He's also a member of the Council of Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat, a very significant council in the United States. He's worked in China, he's worked in Europe, and he's worked in the UAE, around Dubai and such. So it's very nice for the School of Architecture to have somebody with the experience that is as diverse as it is with Architect Kumar. May I request you, well, I'll also acknowledge the presence of our very own trustee, Ashish Rakheja. He will speak a little after. I would want to open this with the Director of School of Architecture in ways that he speaks about the Noida International University in Greater Noida and what it has meant to you to be, partnering this and to be with us here this afternoon. Over to you, Architect Kumar.
Very good afternoon, and thank you so much, Dr. Hariharan, for introducing me. I'm Rajendra Kumar. It is my honor to be with such a known dignitaries, Mr. Murli, Mr. Ashish Rakheja. I had an opportunity for working with one of the projects with Mr. Ashish Rakheja almost a decade back. To introduce myself, I'm an architect. I graduated from Chandigarh College of Architecture, and then further, as Dr. Hariharan said, that I did my master's from Politecnico di Milano, and then briefly I worked in Italy and Spain, mainly in these two important countries of Europe. And then I worked also briefly in China and Middle East. I came back in India almost a decade back, and I had been practicing, and then after a certain period of practicing time, I went into academics. So I'm director of a School of Architecture, the university, Noida International University. We are international university with one of the largest campus of NCR. We are 11 school. The School of Architecture is one of the school. Other school are School of Engineering, School of Medical Science, School of Management and Journalism, and so on and so forth. Total 11 school. I had the vertical of architecture school. To introduce about my school, we had been doing a couple of interesting projects beyond the academia also, because as I have been discussing on number of forum that our curriculum need of reform. And when we talk about reform, the most important reform is to shorten the gap between academia and industry. So to overcome this shortage, we have been working on a couple of projects and involving number of professional bodies. Premchand association with the Premchand Jain Memorial Trust is one of the initiatives which we are very excited. At this forum, I would really like to thank the effort of Mr. Sandeep Narang. He's not in this panel right now, but I would really like to acknowledge his effort for this association. With Premchand Jain Trust, our school had been supportive of last 2-3 years. On number of occasions, my student had been participating in the workshop of trust, and we all miss our honorable late Mr. Premchand Jain. I mean, he's such a torch bearer of green revolution in India. To highlight some of the project what we have done apart from academia in last few years with uh, different organization. We did a workshop with number of embassies. We recently did a workshop with German embassy, where our students have worked on project of sustainability on urban infrastructure level for 3 days, and it was a very interesting workshop. And then we also did a workshop with Howard University with the patronage of Graduate School of Design, and so on and so forth. Our collaboration with the Premchand Jain Trust is really
I
having
have to, sorry, I have to correct you there. It is just Prem Jain Trust. Prem Chand was another as distinguished literate here, but this is Prem Jain Trust.
My
Yeah,
apologies, sir.
no, no,
I'm
no, please.
extremely sorry. I'm
No, no.
extremely sorry, sir. I'm
Okay,
extremely sorry to all the delegate and all
sure.
the panelists. I'm really very sorry
No,
for
no,
it.
no, please.
But so I mean, for us, I mean, it's a very, very big blunder I did. I'm sorry.
Not at all. No,
Uh,
Prem Chand was as well known and immortal in his own ways.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
go on.
I'm sorry, sir.
No,
So,
please.
so we are looking forward for a futuristic collaboration. We are very much committed for any of the initiative where we can do as per with our whatever limited capacity. I have discussed with Mrs. Jan also about what we can do in future. I believe that it is very, very important and very, very welcoming step what trust has taken uh, in in their agenda to involve student, because that's a very, very important, because whatever other green associations, be it, well, I'm not naming the other association, but they had been there, they had been doing a wonderful job. But one part which was really missing is that to connect with the academia, to connect with the student. I mean, there was a connection with academia, but to involve a student from very beginning of their course with these kind of initiative of green and sustainable architecture. It's very, very, very important that in the beginning of their curriculum, they are focused, I mean, they are oriented on this. And when the whole world is talking about sustainable development goal, I believe that organization like Prem Jain Trust,
Right.
we can do much better.
Wonderful.
I'm restricting myself to speak further. I'll be very happy to have some question and to be part of a deliberation
That's
after
right.
the presentation by Mr. Ashish and Mr. Murli. And again, thank you so much, Dr. Hariharan and Dr. Murli and Mrs. Jan. And it's my honor to be with in the same, uh, if I may say podium, but I mean same screen with Ashish Rakija. I mean, we have been really, I mean, he's a
Yes.
really motivating factor for green
Wonderful.
revolution in India.
Very,
Thank you
very,
so
very,
much,
yeah,
Dr.
yeah. No, it's so nice to know that you are an extended part of the family in a certain sense. You know Ashish so well. You used to know Dr. India, I'm sure. And Payal has been doing so much in her own simple ways. Ashish, can I request you to pick up the thread from where he left it in his wonderful ways and talk to the students a little about your own relationship with the trust, with Dr. Jain, and then of course the importance of this event of today or what we are expecting from Murli.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you so much. And namaskar, everyone. It's good to be back to see this living building series come back. I have the privilege of being associated with it right from the beginning. And I'm happy to see that the way it is progressing. And thank you, Dr. Hariharan, for curating the whole thing. I think in your guidance, the whole concept of sustainability especially with context to what we are providing to our student fraternity is going many notches up. Thank you for that. Now, I'm grateful to Rajendra ji. You remembered our past association. It was so good to meet up again after a decade on this platform. And of course, Murli, we are all looking forward to hearing from you. Now, Rajendra ji spoke about association with Dr. Jain, and I had the privilege of being with him for nearly 25 years of my professional career. In fact, I started my career with him, and and I owe my entire success or whatever I am today to him only. He was a to introduce him to you in just briefly. He was a teacher par excellence. Whichever field that he went in, whether he was practicing professionally as a consulting engineer or he was teaching the students, like what even Rajendra mentioned about, he was a teacher all along. He was a man who had the opportunity to go and do his master's and PhD from US way back in 60s. And the concept in those days was nobody used to come back because the opportunities were much better out there. But he decided to come back right at the prime of his career and started doing consulting. In fact, he's also known as the father of the consulting business in India, as far as the building consulting goes. And he introduced the concept of MEP, that means the electromechanical consultancy under one roof. Never before in India we had this kind of a concept. Everybody used to practice individually, but he brought that concept and very successful. His practice grew from just a few handful people to at the peak more than 550 people in the company. And virtually all the buildings, major buildings that you would see in that era till about, I would say 2010, they were being done by his organization, his company that he had set up, which was called Spectral Consultants. All along while he was running a very successful practice, his focus was always students. And he used to be passionate about meeting students. In fact, if you talk to his ex-students, and many of the architects who are practicing today in the country have been his students. He taught at SPA for over 3 decades, and to a level that he was not only taught let's say, he was teaching a student. His father had also been taught by him. So to that level, he was engaged. And I remember seeing him taking the classes early in the morning, flying back from wherever in the country he was, but always in time for the classes. One of the virtues that he carried was punctuality and dedication to the work. Punctuality to an extent that one could synchronize the watch with him for him being at the meetings or for whatever task that he had. And then thereafter, the dedication, he was always looking for excellence in the work. So these are the two strong messages that he carried in his life, which he left behind for the students. And then finally, the love for sustainability, which made him the chairman of the Indian Green Building Council. And under his leadership, India had nearly about 6 billion square feet of green space. And thereafter, of course, the work is being carried forward. So the visionary and the example that he was, I think it's something that we all have to look forward to. In his memory, after we lost him 2 years back, in his memory, we started this Prem Jain Memorial Trust. And Payal, his daughter, who's a successful fashion designer in her own right, has been doing this work. And this series that you see come as part of that initiative that has been taken. PJMT, Prem Jain Memorial Trust, has carved out its own space in the industry today. It's recognized for the work which is being done with respect to student fraternity especially. And I would encourage all of you who are interested in this field of sustainability or would like to meet the mentors in the industry, reach out, be part of this initiative, and it comes at no cost to you. It's all about being together. We have our wonderful speaker, Murli, who's talking about getting a hold on essential sustainability. Now, sustainability has been growing. The topic itself has been growing. I remember when we started the green building movement in India, when we did our first building, which was in Hyderabad, most of us, I would say at least me for sure, did not know anything about it. And from that day, in 20 years that has passed since then, look at where we stand today. I was listening to the IGBC chairman addressed. We stand at 7.5 billion square feet of green space and pushing the green frontier all the time. From just the green rating, the things have evolved. In fact, IGBC today has 28 ratings for the different kind of buildings and evolving further. The concept of sustainability is now moving to an ultimate level of net zero buildings, which I'm sure Murli will cover. We are looking at aspects of water, energy, waste, and ultimately moving on to carbon neutral buildings. You can see the change which is happening in our codes, standards. They're all becoming more and more stringent in terms of efficiency. Just look on the energy side. The ECBC has brought in an era of a real efficient building and moving on to super premium efficiencies in few years from now. The laws that are coming in fact, now the ECBC compliance certificate has to be mandatorily provided for all projects. And I'll just mention one thing here. We were so far thinking that green or ECBC compliance or all of this is part of commercial buildings. Today, even the residential buildings are not spared. You have to look at aspects like insulation in the wall, the glass, the shading devices, all of the things that we used to talk about in past or our earlier buildings used to have is now becoming part of our modern design, a requirement of our modern design. Even the societies like ISHRAE, ASHRAE are working on high performance building designs, high performance building standards, and pushing the projects to a higher level of sustainability. I'm happy to tell you that it's not only the private sector, but the government sector also, the government buildings also look at a new level of sustainability every time a new project comes up. Just last week, we were talking about an industrial project without naming the project, a large project in Bangalore. And the vision which the client has put, we will like to attempt a net zero energy building, a net zero water building, a net zero carbon building. No, this is a vision being put by the client. And if it is not just limited to the private owners only, look at the way even the developers are looking at. Currently, the developers are approaching and looking at the fact that can we do a net zero performance buildings, because they will like to showcase what the future is going to be like. And that future is not very far away. Just like you're seeing a shift towards the EVs, 2025, 2026, whatever that date is, or by 2030, we'll become completely electric vehicles. Similarly, our buildings will be moving majorly towards net zero performances. Governments across the world, codes and standards across the world are now pushing these boundaries, because buildings are a low-hanging fruit when we have to address the challenges, big challenges like the climate shift which is taking place, or the climate change that is taking place. I just want to talk one last thing with your permission, Doctor. I know I'm going a little overboard, but I want to take that last 1 minute. I do want to talk about next level of sustainability which is going to come, which is also on resiliency of buildings. Now, resiliency and sustainability are linked to each other. If you look at the loss to the buildings that take place just due to the climate related disasters, I was reading the Times of India. In 20 years, last 20 years, the climate related disasters have killed 1.3 million people and left 4.4 billion injured and homeless. India has suffered $80 billion loss in 20 years period. And look at the economic loss, the personal loss just coming out of the climate related disasters, and forget about the man-made disasters also. If you add that, the numbers are even higher. So our sustainability at the next level has to look at the building resiliency also, and the essential sustainability in future would include the same. I would just like to end by saying there is a small forum which has been launched, which is called Focus. Do Google on it. It's Forum of Critical Utility Services. It's for the first time the critical utilities are getting a recognition, and the professionals cutting the boundaries of their association are coming together on a common platform to talk about the building resiliency itself, because resiliency is also sustainability.
Yeah.
In the end, I would say we are fortunate to be a developing country because we are still building, and we are not building buildings alone. We are building cities, and that's where the responsibility on us is to build right, to build correctly, build sustainably, and that is where our future lies. Look forward to a great presentation from Murli as usual, and inviting you all to be part of PJMT. And thank you, Doctor, for holding the fort here. Over to you for introducing the speaker.
Thank you, Ashish. Very measured. And always when you speak about Dr. Jain, there is so much of that very deeply imbued sense of admiration, fondness, and reverence. Reverence is a word that I normally don't like to use, but with you I must. When you say I owe everything to Dr. Jain, very touching. Thank you, Ashish, for those words. And before I hand the mic over to Murli Anur, I must tell you, I must confess that my acquaintance with this person is no more than about 12 or 13 months. And the first time I met him, he was CEO of a company, having something to do with original equipment manufacture for water monitoring systems. I don't know what it was, maybe a couple of other meetings, and I saw in him a certain potential because he was so full of a certain sense of deep humility and a commitment to wanting to explore innovations. And the story led to eventually him, taking over, steering this company called Ecol that he does now. But this story is not about the company. This story, ladies and gentlemen, all of you youngsters out there, architects, engineers, this story is about the abundance of solutions that are available that are hugely economically viable, and how Murli has built his story around these solutions at this new environment enterprise. Over to you, Murli. It's 3:25. I'd request you to take maybe about 40 minutes, if you don't mind, or maybe less. I'll leave that to you. And then we'll open and field questions with Architect Kumar, with Ashish, and yourself, of course. Yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you so much. Good afternoon to everyone present virtually in this webinar. And first of all, I would like to thank Premchand Memorial Trust for inviting and giving me an opportunity to present my thought process on what it takes to get hold of an essential sustainability part of it. Now I have a presentation. I'm going to talk about a couple of things which are known, which are not known. And it is basically divided into two parts. One is the problems, and other is part of what are the solutions that will be available, that can be made available. Let me share my screen. Yeah, is it visible?
Not yet. Not yet. Does the host have to allow you to share screen?
Yeah, just one second.
Yes, no, I think you're getting there. Yes, you got it. You have to now put it on the view mode and you're saving. Yes.
Okay. The topic of today's discussion is, getting hold of essential sustainability. Now, like what Ashish said and others said, sustainability is a very huge subject. It is a growing subject. And as of today, there is no end to it when we talk of discussions on that. Now, before even we go to sustainability, what is that actually that is lacking or that is needed? There are 4 top engineering challenges which are still in front of us of the century. Now, what are those? Everything around us revolves on engineering. It's basic engineering, right? The first basic engineering challenge that exists in front of us is predominantly belonging to the category of materials and buildings. Now, we know how the buildings were built 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago. They were using standard brick and mortar, which used to deteriorate all the top layer fertile soils, and which led to the innovation of making concrete blocks, hollow blocks. But is that enough? If you look at the way the buildings are built in Singapore or in Japan, they're built in a more sophisticated manner using advanced materials. That is what we need in the materials and building structure today. How we can innovate or bring out materials and building methodologies, engineer them so that it helps in the overall sustainability, because that is the foundation. Whatever you do, rest is only add-ons. Now, what is the next challenge? We all know Panchabhuta is the prime for everybody, but there is one element which is predominantly ignored by everybody today in the world is water. We think water is free. In my next few slides, I'm going to stress more on that. But what the challenge today in front of us as engineers or engineering fraternity is, how can we develop systems where I do not use fresh water only once in my day? When I mean only once, when we go in the morning, when we flush our toilets, that water is gone, 20 liters. Is it worth it? How can I reuse it? That is a thought process, that is the engineering, that is the science which has to be curated and developed. And next, same thing is with the energy. Today, we all know how the energy is produced. There are traditional methods, there are conventional, there are renewable energies, coal powers, thermal powers, solar powers, and nuclear powers. But is it good enough? So much of energy is lost when I have to transmit power from Kalpakkam to Bangalore. I mean, we still lie on those traditional high grid lines, HT lines. Today we talk of remote wireless charger for smartphones. Why can't we innovate something like that for power transmission as well, which solves a lot of purpose? That's the engineering challenge we should think, we should look at. And especially as students who want to take up a career in sustainability area, these are lines you should think about. And not but the least, the transportation and technology has to be disruptive. Today, we all rely on technology, and technology dependency is only going to go up, but it's not going to come down. So how can we include technology as an integral part of all the disruptions that we are going to bring in our daily lives for sustainability? What we need, what is that we need actually today in the world? We need a whole new world of solutions. And when I mean by that, I have just captured really 5 or 4 important points in this. The first is, whoever we are, whether we are a residential community, we are an institution, we are an industry, hospital, doesn't matter to what market segment we belong to. What, as a customer, I should look at it as, can I implement a solution where my fresh water demand is reduced by up to 90%? As a professional, I would want it 100%, but let's be practical. Let us say 90%. It's good to begin with, then we can reach 100%. Same way, I'm taking so much of power, so many megawatts of power or so many kilowatts of power from the grid. How can I reduce it by 70%? What all I can implement? What all solutions can we bring onto the table? And now we all know, we all live in metro cities, class A cities. We know the problem of waste disposal. We know the problem of disposing dry waste, plastics, electronics, medical waste. We should come out with a solution where 100% savings on disposal cost. It should be able to be disposed where it is used. It should not even leave your premises. And especially the biggest of the devils is the wet waste. So many landfills, mountains and mountains of landfill the moment you enter NCR region. You can see that. It looks like a mountain, but it is not. It's a heap and pile of waste which is being dumped as landfill. I mean, is it really worth it? I mean, if I have to get into, elaborate on the harms and the side effects, it's a separate subject by itself. But do we really need that? At every stage, we should look at something where my wet waste export is zero. I'm not throwing out any wet waste. And like I said, technology today is growing, and technology has to be an integral part of whatever engineering, whatever solutions we bring onto the table. And best is, with today's internet world, the system should be able to see what I have been saving, what is my usage. That we call it as 3M solution, which is measure, monitor, and manage real time on my smartphone or on my laptop, wherever I am. That's the thing which is needed today, which will value add to the solutions. Now, before we go into the solutions, let us take step by step. There are problems which, as individual residents, we tend to ignore. We know about it, but we ignore them. What are those? The first and the biggest devil of all in the water system is our RO system. Now, why do we use RO? There are a lot of reasons, but let us not get into that. We know the side effects of the RO. RO removes all the minerals from the water. The RO, what we get out, is equivalent to the distilled water, what we put it in the batteries. And we drink it happily, thinking it is safe. Is it really safe? No, it has to be remineralized. Our body needs minerals. Without that, we'll become like battery. Now, that is one aspect on the quality. Now, second aspect, RO has 30% wastage of reject water. If I'm getting 10 liters of RO filtered water, 3 liters of that is going as waste. Now, this reject water is so harmful. The ppm of this reject water is close to 3,000, 3,500. You can't use it for anything else. It has to go down the stormwater drain or municipal drain. If you try to drink this RO reject water, I'm sure you're going to die in next 24 hours. That is how harmful this water is. And what happens when this water goes to the drain? It eventually goes into any natural water aquifer. And you know what happens then? And we all feel, RO water is cheap. But if you do the mathematics, bare minimum, the RO water costs about 7.5 paise per liter. Apart from being expensive, water quality being damaging to the human body, a 30 LPH capacity RO system in an year makes damage to the extent of 300K tons of carbon footprint. I'm talking of just one RO system. Imagine the number of ROs you have in your residential community, you have in your offices, and I'm sure you can do the math by yourselves. Now, there are some myths. What are those? Here it is. The first one is the beautiful thing which I hear from every customer I meet. Boss, I'm using borewell water, which is free. But if you look at it, is your borewell water really free? Where is it coming from? How is it coming from? Is it magic that, from the borewell, it is automatically coming into your lap? No. If you actually sit and do the mathematics of the borewell, on an average, the borewell water costs you anywhere between 3.5 paise to 4.5 paise per liter. It is not free, but the customers, we say, oh, borewell water is free. Zameen se aa raha hai. Free pani hai. This is not true. This is a myth we all live with. Second, oh, government water supply is very cheap. Why should I, go for the sustainability mode or other solutions? Later slides, I'm covering this in more detail. I'll emphasize more on this at a later stage. Third myth is, If we drink retreated water, we will die immediately. Is it really so? When we go out of India, when we travel to Western countries, when we travel to Singapore, we happily drink the tap water even without asking a single question. Where is this water coming from? Next time when you go to Singapore or next time when you go to Germany, you ask a question, you'll get an answer yourself. Then you'll be shocked to know probably you're drinking treated wastewater. If you are not dead there, probably you wouldn't be drinking here also. And the biggest myth is Earth has water, water and water everywhere. We are covered with 70% water. Why worry, boss? Happily enjoy, waste the water. Why think of reusability? Why think of sustainability? And the most blunder we all do, especially in the big cities like NCR, Mumbai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, we trust the guy who's bringing the water from a water tanker is much better than using my own water, which is in my premises, treated. We don't know where the tanker water is coming from. Eventually, it has to come from either from a bore well or from other retreat facility. Just to give you an example, in Bangalore, we have seen used sanitary napkins coming out of these tanker waters. Now you can imagine yourselves where that guy must be getting his water from. And best part is our adamant attitude. I don't care. Why I don't care? Water is not my problem. It is government problem. Government, I have elected the government. Government should give me the water. Why should I worry about it? It is their responsibility, not my responsibility. And I have a shower. Let me enjoy the shower. Let me waste 100 liters in a day. Why should I take bath in a bucket of water? Do you really need 100 liters in a day to take bath? You don't. A 20-liter bucket is more than sufficient, but we don't care. And places like, where there is abundant sunlight, people still use geyser, gas geyser, electricity geyser, water to heat iron rods, all those stuffs. Then you can shift to solar thermal water heating, which is much better, much purer. But no, I'm going to use geyser. I don't want to, spend so much on my solar hot water system. And when we talk of conservation, people say, what conservation? Not for me. It is not my cup of tea. It's for somebody else, not for me. And what parts as part of conservation is your measure, monitor, and manage. We know we are abusing the system. And that is why there is a resistance to measure and monitor. Suppose if I say your household of 3 people or 4 people consumes 700 liters per day, you're doing injustice to the system, but you want to ignore it, you don't care it because you don't want to fall in that category of being recognized as a person who's abusing the system. Now, this is as far as we as individuals in a profession or a residents are concerned. Now, as an industry, there is a bigger problem. What is that? I have set up an industry. I have made my investment. For me, today, my return on investment is the most important thing. I don't care for anything else. Why should I care? What is sustainability? I don't care. I have put in 10 crores. I need to make 30 crores in the next 2 years. That is my main. What happens in the interim? I don't care. Okay, my industry is there. I'll keep my premises clean. What happens outside my premises? I don't bother because it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the government. Why should I worry about it? Let others worry. No? I'm keeping my house clean. And when we talk to so many industries, when we talk of sustainability, they say, boss, fine, all you say is great. It's good to hear, but does it bring me extra business? Does it fetch me extra ROI? They need to understand a lot of that when they approach sustainability development, their return on investment is much, much higher than what it has been before, which they don't. And when we talk of sustainability, many industries say, forget everything, boss. I am not in a mood to invest on any heavy capital investment for all your sustainability solutions. If I have to spend 5% more on my operational expenses, my labor, I'll pay that. I will not do any sustainability aspects. Same thing, many industries I have seen personally, they would have a sewage treatment plant, but all that water goes into the stormwater drain or underground drainage. And when we talk them, it is a government problem. Why should I use it? Why should I worry about it? They have told me to put a STP, I have put up. I have stuck to the norms, I have stuck to the rules. They didn't tell me that I have to reuse it. So they leave it up. And many of us as industrialists and business people, government increases the water and energy tariff year on year, which they have to eventually, because everything goes under laws. When they increase the tariff, we fight, saying, boss, why are you increasing the tariff? It is unfair. You can't do that. But am I thinking internally? Am I doing something to cut down? Today, if I'm spending 10 lakhs on my energy bill, just because the government has increased the tariff when I know the bill is going to go 13 lakhs, am I doing something to bring down my energy consumption, to bring the bill back to 9 lakhs? No, we don't, but we fight with the government. And this is the beautiful, sentences I've heard from many customers. Boss, you're talking of sustainability, everything is fine, but it hampers my productivity. It hampers my production capability. Is it really true? Just sit and think over. When I'm giving you example, when we can give pure drinking water from a STP feed water, how does it impair your productivity? How does it hamper your productivity? And best part is blame it on Rio. Boss, Western countries manage it so well, but we don't do it. Are you doing an effort to go there? Are you trying to do something about it? No, we just blame the other. We all know the basic rule which we have been taught in our schools. When you're pointing finger at somebody, there are 3 fingers pointing towards you. We don't do that. Why? And best part is rules of conservation is not for me. No, it's not for me. It's for somebody else, not for me. And what happens because of all this? Like Ashish was mentioning, there is a huge impact on ecology and economy. Now, what happens because of that? This is the first image I want to show you. This year in 2020, despite of COVID and everything else, from the monsoon season beginning of June till about end of last month, 45% of India's landmass was inundated with rainwater, cities clogged, drainage clogged, flooding, everything which India had not seen in previous years. Why is it happening? Example, a city like Hyderabad, which doesn't see much of rain, which is a dry, hot, humid place, was flooded for 3 weeks continuously, where cars and automobiles were floating like papers in the clogged water. Isn't it an impact on the ecological damage we have done all these years? This is the second slide. During COVID, when the lockdown was there across the country, there were a lot of reports, a lot of medias on the social media, a lot of videos of Yamuna water in Delhi being crystal clear. Why was that so? And why is it not now? It is because we abuse the natural water bodies with contamination. We abuse them ecologically, and we don't understand what it takes for that river to rejuvenate itself. And because of this, what happens is we have seen a number of reports, the aqua bodies are dying, the aquatic animals are dying. I mean, these are the collateral damages which happens because of, our adamantness. And obviously because of which, your cost in everything goes up. It might not go substantially in one shot, but if you take a periodical assessment of the cost, the OPEX, the capital expenditure, it would have gone up at least by 10 to 15%. And because of all this, what is happening is what should have been free, we are paying for it today. Water which should have been free, we pay for 20 rupees for our bottle of water. And if we don't wake up now, we are going to be ending up like dinosaurs in a very short period of time. Now, let me hurry up. I think I'm running short of time. So what is the way out? The only way out is building resilience in the management of water, energy, waste, and air. Now, what can be done? Like Ashish was saying, the entire sustainability industry is moving towards net zero building system. So the first thing we can do in water is develop and implement net zero water systems. What it does primarily, it takes all your used water, takes it through composite water treatment solutions, wherein you can easily recover 80 to 90% of your water, which stays in a closed loop. So once the water comes into the system, it be remaining in the loop and it should not be given out in any form. And then to top it ahead, your rainwater, your A2 water systems, which give you pure drinking water. This is something which is needed today. Now, what are the water woes of the city? Let me take one particular example here. We all know every commercial building, a mall, predominantly has centralized ACs, and most of the time they use something called as a water-cooled chiller plants. Now, if I have to take an example, I've taken 3 examples, basically for NCR region, Mumbai and Bangalore. As per the data statistics we have, as on today, NCR region has around 2200 TR of chiller plants working. Mumbai has about 1800 TR and Bangalore has about 1200 TR. Just keep these numbers in your mind. Now, when you look at this graph, the first graph is the fresh water demand on a daily basis in these 3 regions. And this is in crores of liters. Now, if you look at NCR, it takes about 320 crore liters of fresh water being pumped in on a daily basis. So is Mumbai, it is at 260, and Bangalore is at around 130. Now, the municipal body doesn't give fresh water to be used in the chiller plants. So what happens? If you take the NCR region, the average daily demand is about 75 crore liters, which means it has to come from groundwater. And in Mumbai, it is about 60, and in Bangalore, it is about 40 crore liters. Now, like I said in my previous slide, government water supply is not cheap. Why? It has leakages, it has losses when water is pumped from river to your household. Now, those losses are not small. Suppose if you take NCR, for example, when 320 crore liters of water is pumped, 120 crores of liter is lost. Now, which means 120 plus 75, close to 200 crore liters is being extracted from groundwater. Now, how long this will sustain? How long this groundwater will be there? We all know the story. What we used to get in Bangalore, borewells at 300 feet, today we don't even get it at 1,200 feet. And this is the same story across the cities in India. What does this tell us? This tells us we should do something about net zero water systems. Now, there is a specific solution available for combating this issue. The STP treated water, which is predominantly available in all the commercial buildings, can be retreated to pure potable grade water, and it can be given as an input to the HVAC chiller plants. With this, what happens is the water softeners which are used for softening the bore water or the tanker water for the chiller plant, which uses rock salt or other types of salt, can be completely removed. So your operational expenses come down, your chiller plant performance increases, you don't have softener expenses, and the complete 80 to 90% of the water stays in the loop system. can you imagine the amount of savings, economical, environmental, this will bring in? Next, same way, we should cut on energy, not on luxury. Let me take a simple example. All the commercial buildings, all the established big factories, malls, institutions, we all have a substation built within. Do you know there are technological interventions available which can enhance the performance of your substation and bring down 8 to 12% of energy efficiency in your system? Grid efficiency I'm talking about. Same way, we all have split ACs in our homes, in our offices. Let's say nowadays 5-star AC is a trend. Earlier, let's say 8 years down the line, we had 2-star, 3-star ACs. There are simple technological interventions available which can bring down energy demand for these ACs by up to 30% or 40% in some cases. And these doesn't cost much. We should implement these kind of solutions. Now, let me quickly take you through some case studies, which will make sense as to, you will understand what, when I'm saying water resilience and energy resilience. I'm taking example of a large IT park in Bangalore, which had 8 different blocks, and they all had, HVAC chiller plants with water cooled chillers, everything. They used to buy about 100 KLD of water, fresh water, tanker water, at a price of ranging from 15 paise to 25 paise per liter. And they also had a secondary problem of disposing of the STP water, which used to cost them about 3 to 5 paise per liter. And the softener and cooling tower OPEX, it was average around 15 lakhs per year. So after a couple of discussions, the first project for 100 KLD was implemented. And what was the result after 1 year? They saved a massive 45 lakh rupees on just the cost on buying the fresh water for their chiller plants. Over top of that, they saved around 15 lakh rupees in their cooling tower operation, maintenance, and softener expenses. And 10 lakh rupees, which they used to burn just for giving out the STP water to be drained somewhere else, they saved about 10 lakh rupees. If you look at it, it's close to about 70 to 80 lakhs of saving in 1 year, and the system doesn't cost them so much. And we are talking of ROAs in the system. This is basically the snapshot of the system. Like I said, technological intervention is needed. The black screen you see here, where the customers can see the amount of water that is being treated, the amount of water that is coming in, the basic parameters of the quality of the water that is going out into the chiller plants. Now, like I said, the AC saver part, where it is a simple technological intervention where it can save you anywhere between 25 to 40%. And not but last, the waste to energy. This is a beautiful technology that is available, which still further can be enhanced for efficiency. I'm taking a simple example of a fruit and vegetable market, which is in Coimbatore. They used to have about 1.5 tons of fruit and vegetable waste, and they had a huge disposing problem. It used to rot in the market for weeks together, the stench, the bad foul coming out of that. So there was a project executed converting basically this waste into power, energy. And what was the beauty? There were about 1,500 street lights surrounding that vegetable market. All those street lights today are powered from the waste which is available in that market. Now, these are the solutions which are available, which can be developed, which can be innovated. There are solutions available, but still innovation is needed for most economy and benefits. And these solutions should be available across all industries, not to a particular industry. It could be pharma, hospitality, healthcare, construction, food and beverage, automotive, consumer healthcare, not but the least, even for the residential communities. Now let us come to some points which I'm going to tell you, which are going to be shocking for you. Now, we know all global water availability we have learned in our schools. Earth has about 70% of water, but out of this, 97.5% is salt water. So how much it remains? Only 2.5% of fresh water. And where is this 2.5% of fresh water? Close to 70% is stuck away in the glaciers, which you can't extract on a daily basis. So what it leaves with, 30% of groundwater, just 0.4% of surface water. Now, if you just recollect my screen on the water that is being used for chiller plants in NCR, Mumbai, and Bangalore, you'll get to know the mathematics, mental math, and you'll be shocked where this water is coming from. And this is the freshwater sea. When we talk of freshwater availability in the world, predominantly most of the glacier freshwater, other freshwater is predominantly available close to about 40% in North America, close to about 22% in Latin America, about 15% in Europe. We as India and our biggest neighbor in terms of population, China, we have only 9% of the fresh water source available. Does it ring alarm bells in you? If it doesn't, then I don't know what will. And just keep remembering, we have just 9% of fresh water available out of that 2.5%. Now, if you see this graph, if you look at it, if I take the statistics across domestic, industrial, and agricultural sector, India uses the highest amount of water out of that 9%. Where are we heading to? If we don't implement sustainability solutions, we are going to be next Cape Town or Johannesburg or even some desert. So what is the mantra or the sutra that is we have to adopt as we go forward? First mantra, individual initiatives don't count. They don't make impact. What we as individuals should focus is on the bulk use and waste. How can I optimize the bulk use? How can I optimize the bulk waste? That is where the thought process has to be there. Second, authorities always try to divert attention from the challenges we all have. When there is a water challenge, it gets diverted to something else. When there is an energy challenge, it gets diverted to something else. Don't get diverted. We should not get diverted. If there is an energy issue, if there is a water issue, if there is a waste issue, we should focus there as individuals, as a community, as industrialists, as businessmen, and how can I not get diverted and focus on resolving these issues. Next, we should all believe in creating an ecosystem. If we fight it as an individual, as a small organization, it is going to lead us nowhere. Like Ashish was saying a few minutes back, that there is a group called Focus, which is started. Predominantly, it is started with the same thought process. Like that, there has to be many groups. People have to come together. We have to create an ecosystem of solutions for bulk use and waste. Doesn't matter who comes in, who joins. If we all have the same mind, same inclination, same thought process, then it is very much possible. And not the least, we all talk of individual social responsibility and corporate social responsibility. Yes, it's a good thing to have, but it should be to galvanize solutions to address these bulk challenges and not for just a government rule saying where I have to do 2% CSR, I have to do 4% CSR. That should never be the approach. Now, I'm just going to finish in next 2 minutes, sir. Who are we? ECOL as an organization, it's an ecosystem which is being built and which is being expanded, where we have a consortium of people who are very rich and iconic leadership in the green and sustainable industry. We call them core counselors, and these people have been associated with various world bodies who have been thriving on sustainability aspects in some or the other way for last so many decades. These are some of the institutions with which our core counselors are associated with. And we are bringing in an ecosystem of like-minded people, like-minded institutions, where we can take a complete sustainability solutions to the customer. It is not a piece solution, it is not a product solution, but it is a complete package of ecological sustainable solutions. Now that is it from my side. I hope I have been able to throw some light on what is all about sustainability and how we should ensure going forward we don't fall into the trap and we become sustainable. As India is a growing country, if we become sustainable, then we'll be a much strong force to reckon with in the global economy than we are today. These are my contact coordinates if any of you want to reach me out. And thank you so much for patiently listening to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Murli. Ashish, we don't have anything as questions that have popped up in either the chat or the Q&A window. To the rest of you out there, as students go, I must tell you that Murli, he spent about 15 years, I think, or was it a dozen years at least, in the IT sector. Then he comes back to India around 2007 or 8, invests in about 1,000 acres on a commitment where he believes that he can convert woody biomass into energy. That is, I have vegetation in a certain kind of, shall we say, an analog forest or an artificially created forest or a plantation, and then I make energy out of it. He spent about 10 years making that project work. And then in the next 3-4 years, between 2014 and 18, decided to, or 2019, decided to do quite a few things on water monitoring, quality systems, and so on. It's only the last, say, is it 7 or 8 months, Murli, about late November or so last year, that he chose to see that he moves into a broader spectrum of solutions. He's clearly coming from a marketing area, as you might have possibly noticed, as tones go when he spoke. He didn't speak too much about the solutions that he has been offering. Well, that's maybe you have. I was thinking that. I now see one question from Satish Singh. Shiv Sarab. Understand it's possible to apply it across every section. Okay, it's a question of Murli. You're also seeing it on your chat box. Would you want to take it up? Why don't we work towards replacing water systems used in toilets by napkins? I mean, washing, replaced by wiping. No. Well, I will answer that question for you, Shiv Sarab. Doesn't happen. It's not as viable. Would you do it? Like Murli asked you earlier on multiple things that we don't do, and things that others will do. These are traditional and very hygienic, healthy traditions that India has had of not wiping our bottoms but washing our bottoms. Excuse me for putting it directly, but the point is not to do with any such minor incremental saving in water. The actual concern that people like you, Shiv, or Sanjeev, or Basant, all of you should have is, are we, as professionals tomorrow, as builders of tomorrow, of India's future, are you willing to look at what you can do to bring efficiency in the way that we produce power? Every 1,000 units of power that any thermal plant produces in India means about 30,000 liters of water. How do we make that more efficient? How do we ensure that cities like NCR, regions like NCR or even Bombay, do not lose 40 to 50% water on leakages today? NCR loses, by my reckoning, about 40% on 320 crores. That's about 120 crore liters of water every day. These are the issues that need, addressing. Ashish, do you have any notes to offer on what you have heard so far from them, or this question from Shiv Sarab?
So, thank you, Doctor. I think, again, a very, very pertinent point brought forward by Murli. And I'll just share an experience which we had just a few weeks back.
Right.
When we do these green buildings, we had always taken water for granted in the terms that we will always be very, very water efficient. And there's enough water which is available from a sewage treatment plant to take care of the air conditioning and other requirements.
Right.
Now, what has happened is, as the buildings are becoming more and more efficient, water efficient, especially. The fixtures are becoming efficient, and the usage is being monitored. The amount of water going to the sewage treatment plant is also reduced. And as consequently, the makeup water that is available to the cooling towers, which has to provide it from the sewage treatment plant, is not adequate at this point of time. So our reliance on groundwater or fresh water becomes even more in that context. Even though the air conditioning loads are being brought down, but then the reduction in the water demand is far more today because of the very, very efficient fixtures that we have started getting in the market now. So looking at that context, I think what Murli brought out, the need to conserve water is definitely there. As a practitioner, we are now forced to look at the ways of cutting down of the makeup water requirement in the cooling tower. You know, on one end, when we are talking of water efficiency, and one has to look at the energy efficiency also. Moving to air-cooled chillers in a country which is predominantly hot everywhere, just using air-cooled chillers may not be the best solution also, because then we have gained on one side, but we are lost on the other side, and both the sides belong to us only. So from that context, I think there's a bigger responsibility on the designers now to create a new balance with the lesser water available from the sewage treatment plant and the growing need of the cooling, which is because of the demand growing. So that's the biggest challenge that we have today. I'm happy that there are solutions which are emerging from a hybrid cooling towers, which is another great area where there is a indirect evaporative cooling towers which are available. Or the hybrid cooling towers which are available, to many other things that we are looking at. So I won't get into solutions at this point, but yeah, the challenges have become new for us to address now.
Fair enough. Payal Jain, it's a pleasure seeing you here with access to the microphone. Would you want to add anything to this discourse here today, this afternoon? Payal? Okay, while she possibly unmutes, you're right, Ashish, but then my only counter to what you're saying is that if you look at this whole world or universe of certified green buildings, we've not even scratched the surface in this country. We are at less than 5% by any data that you and I know stand validated. So we are looking at, 7-8 billion square feet, as against probably a current building stock of 170 billion square feet. So there are, as you know, many, many numbers of five-star hotels and all kinds of buildings, including tech parks, which do not at all come under anything that is, part of the radar of the Green Building Council. So the challenge, therefore, of water being drawn as groundwater in our cities for air conditioning remains on one side, and the big other challenge being this this barrier to use treated water. If the treated water is from my apartment to a point where it is high grade, high hygiene water, I still don't want to drink it. What do you think we should do, especially in cities like Bangalore? And I know in almost every living building series where you talked about water, you have touched upon Bangalore's challenge, though you sit in Delhi. What do you think we should be doing about this barrier, the human barrier?
So, Doctor, first of all, I think you brought out the building percentage, but I think you also need to focus on the human population percentage. We may be small, 5% in terms of the overall building stock, but we sit on a 20% of world's population. If I look at the 7 billion people worldwide, we are 1.4 billion people ourselves. So, and if we were to move to the same effluent level, you know what challenges are lying ahead. Look at the freshwater reserves. I think we have, did I hear Murli say 2% of the freshwater reserves or something like that? So the challenges to are bigger. The barrier that we have, you're absolutely right in saying, first of all, it's a barrier which is surmountable. It's just been around. Murli very, very rightly mentioned that if you go to Singapore, and you also said this in your talk previously in the Living Building Series 1, We said the new water, which is available in Singapore, is nothing but a recycled water. And we only realize it after you've taken that you're doing that. We had an ad which was done a few years back where our earlier Chief Minister Sheila Dikshit was shown drinking water from a sewage treatment plant and saying it is safe. So I think there is a need to get that myth out of the mind, because the water that we are drawing from our rivers, they are nothing but sewers only. They are big sewers. From where we are drawing the water, we are drinking water. And if what is coming from sewage treatment plant is also coming from the same things, because that thing is going there.
Right.
I do want to make one point here, doctor.
Yes, please.
We always say that India is blessed. It's a sone ki chidiya. We are a sone ki chidiya if you look at the resources that the God has given us. I was talking to someone and I was listening to a presentation from someone who said that the rain gods give us so much that it actually can meet all our demand. But it's just that we are only using a fraction of it and the rest is going into the waste. So whether it's Bangalore, where there are enough examples of harnessing rainwater to meet the yearly demand, to our Himalayan regions, to any other city, there's enough water. What we are lacking is water management, not the quantity of water at this point of time. So I come from that background.
Absolutely, very well said, and that's a nice concluding point. All of you students out there, take this back if you haven't taken anything away from this 1 hour that you all spent with us. Water or energy is not about water or energy. It is about water management. It's about energy management. You heard Ashish say it. You heard Murli say it. You heard your own director say it before he decided to step away from this conversation today because he had another urgent meeting. We have 2 minutes. Sheena, can you give us a kind of a note of thanks, shall we say, for the speakers, the distinguished speakers who have made
Doctor, can I just, I think one point which you do need to touch on, I think you are a veteran in this. I think you should talk to students about the energy water nexus. Just say a few words.
All right.
It'll be a right way to end the whole.
Absolutely. Agree.
Thank you for reminding me of that. We have only 1 minute, but I shall indulge. I will take your, take liberty of this. Oh, let me put it this way. Look at what Ashish sir said just now. When you consume water, you are not actually consuming water. You're consuming energy. When you walk into that shopping mall or any such space which is centrally air conditioned, the space uses not just energy, it's using a great deal more of water. So what is this connect between water and energy? And is there a way of you as engineers or as architects taking up studies into the future where you're able to bring about this big shift in the way we use water and therefore the reduction in consumption of energy? California has shown in just the last, say, 4 years that the total quantum of energy that they saved by only focusing on campaigns for water saving was far larger than all their efforts over the last 10 years on energy savings alone. Now, all you have to do is to go back to your Google and search a few things on Nexus and water and energy. It's called the Water G Nexus in many ways. Very, very wonderful champions in the world who are talking about it. I will leave this there. Please understand that when we use water, it is not just water that we use. As a matter of fact, the concern is not so much about the quantum of water you use as much as it is about the high abuse of energy that happens every time you use water. I'll stop there for now. Thank you, Ashish, for having reminded me on this. Over to you, Sheena Mehra, for some small quick note from the Noida University.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. I will just stop my video.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for organizing this webinar, and thanks to the speakers, Murli sir, Ashish Rakheja sir, for their informative lecture.
Yes.
I'm really sorry that Director sir had to urgently leave. Actually, he had some urgent meeting in Gurgaon, so he had to leave urgently.
Sure.
So I apologize on his behalf. And above all, I like to thank all the audience So I can see some of our students here.
Right.
And sir, actually, I would like to say that it was actually a very awakening session, that how we misuse our resources and how we know everything, but still we ignore each and everything. And actually, how can we, but just by taking small steps, how can we rectify these problems?
Sure.
Yeah. So at the end, I just want to just say thanks to everyone. Thanks
Right.
to Premjan Memorial Trust for organizing
Yes.
this webinar, and I hope we will be touch in future.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
And
sir.
on behalf of Ashish, Payal Jain, and all of us at the Prem Jain Memorial Trust, I must thank Professor Jayanand, the Honorable Vice Chancellor of the Noida International University, as well as the Director of the School of Architecture, Architect Rajendra Kumar, who was with us for some time in the session. Thank you, Murli Anur, for having
Thank you,
given
sir.
us time and for sharing what I thought was a very simple presentation for children. Most of us, when we are 19, 20, 21, do not understand some of these seemingly uncomplicated conceptual frameworks, but I thought you made an effort to make that as simple as it can be for them all. Thank you so much for what you did. Thanks, Ashish, as always, for finding time and for all those extremely lucid comments that you always make in such sessions. Should we close here? I think we should sign off. It's already 4:18, 3 minutes past our time, cap. Yeah. Thank you, Ashish.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
doctor. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Namaskar, everyone.
Namaskar. Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot, everyone. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.